Okay, we'll get started here as soon as this comes up. Our main topic today is going to be how to choose a printer by myself, Tom Kreuzer, and Chuck Scott's going to give his experience there. Before we get to the main topic, we'll cover a few of the club items there. Our next general meeting will be February 13th, Wednesday. We'll be back in the Baltic room, and it'll be on decluttering, PC decluttering. So good time of the year, we're cleaning out, we're doing stuff, what files to keep, what to get rid of, how to organize some of the stuff, reduce the amount of paper that you have. And if we have time, I'll talk about old tech equipment, how to recycle, donate, or sell that. The next MacSig is Friday, January 25th. So if you have an iPod, an iPhone, anything Mac related, or are just interested in it, they're a good meeting to go to. Okay. Yeah. But I skipped one. Our officers, Jim Holman is our president there. Linda Brown, I don't see Linda here, is our vice president. Paul Ebert is our membership secretary. Mike Griffin is our treasurer in MacSig. Stan Miller is our secretary. Andrew Pertusi is our communication coordinator. And I'm Tom Kreuzer. I'm a director at large. Members old and new, and I've gotten some of the items. Bonnie will try and get you some change or that. You can drop it off with me, and we'll get it to Paul there. Just a reminder, if you are changing your email, whether you're retiring or changing providers or something like that, make sure and notify us, because that's how we send out all these notices and what's going on. Suggestions for topics, you can email, you can talk to any of the board members. We're always looking for people to volunteer, present on hardware, software. And if you don't want to present, we do have a monthly newsletter. You can write a short, meaning a sentence or two, or a long, 10, 20 pages, as long as you want, and we'll put it in the newsletter. Website, I mentioned here, and I sent out an email about this. It looks like 3M is now blocking access to Google Drive files. That's if you're within the 3M network, or so you're an employee trying from your employee computer. It looks like they're blocking access to the Google Drive. The 3M Club uses the Google Drive for some of its PDF files, like the survey, handouts, meeting slides. That's all linked on the website to Google Drive, so that's getting blocked. You can access those files when you're not connected to the 3M network. So like if you're at home, or you use your phone or a tablet or that from at home, access should be fine. But we're looking to see if we can find a solution that might work for both the employees and the retired people, where everybody can access some of this stuff. So if you have any ideas, you can talk to me, and we'll try out some of this stuff, and hopefully we can find a little solution that'll work there. But we do have out on the website past meetings and slides, recordings. So like I'm recording the audio and the slides here, that'll be out there. Deals section, our newsletter, and all of that is out there. Our PC Club survey, just completed that in December, the end of December there, and I'd like to thank everybody who responded. We have roughly 127 members, and 62 responded, which is great, because the survey is quite long for all of you who've gone through it there. The results, I published that, and there's 11 pages of information in there, trends, and as a group, how we answered some of these things. There's no individual names or any information that we give out to anybody there, but it's interesting to see some of the trends and how tablets and phones are doing, and the percentage of Apple and PC related stuff. So it's kind of nice. And then we also have you vote on topics, future topics. So the board then uses this information to plan some of its meetings and that. So thank you very much for your response.
Tom, what would help me is if you put on there what I said last year.
Yeah, yeah, because
I could use the same thing. I don't have to. I could just fill in the new stuff.
Yeah, that's that would be a little easier there. The one thing probably that could be done along those lines is if we had people log in, but we don't really want to get to the logging in part. If you had a Google account, let's say, we could actually bring up your past answers and that, but because we don't want to force everybody to have a Google account or that, we've just left it open for anybody. So actually, if you went out there and created 2 surveys or 3 surveys, we can't block it from you putting in that. Yep.
Is there a way to add a quick button at the end of the survey?
I don't believe so. I'm not aware of that with the Google. Now, we've had other people suggest some other services like SurveyMonkey, and there's other survey sites out there. Some of those survey sites limit the number of questions or the number of people that you can send it out to, so we haven't really pursued some of that. But certainly, I appreciate everybody filling it out and taking the time, because there are, I don't know, with all the topics and things like that, you're scrolling through, maybe a dozen pages, the equivalent of a dozen pages, and picking things out. So it does take time there. Okay. This I mentioned, if you're not aware, there's a TV series that just started last Sunday called Valley of the Boom. It's a National Geographic series. There's going to be 6 episodes, and it goes back to the 1990s when the internet was starting up, and it's if you like history and kind of lived through some of that stuff, it's pretty interesting. It's not a complete documentary. They do kind of spice it up or change some of the facts around a little bit, but it's probably 90-95% documentary style. They have some of the people involved doing commentary and stuff like that, but it is really interesting, or for me anyway, it's very interesting. Any club questions before we get to the main topic? Okay, and if you don't have a handout, I think Jim put some handouts back on the table there, so you can pick up a handout if you don't have one. There's hundreds of printers, and they all range in price from $30 up to over $1,000, depending on the features and the technology. Choosing the right printer can be tough with so many models to choose from. We'll be talking about printers that print documents and photographs. We won't be talking about 3D printers for printing parts, the ones that use epoxy or things like that, to where you can actually print 3D models of stuff and things like that. We aren't talking about 3D printers. Okay, one of the main we'll first talk about the main considerations that when you're looking at printers there. The first question is, do you need color, or can you just get by with black and white? If you mainly just print documents, there's no reason to spend money on color output where the cost of maintaining 4 color cartridges can be expensive there. If you have a black and white printer, it doesn't mean that you can't print color, because there's lots of services out there like Walgreens, Sam's, FedEx, UPS, where you can print your color photos or color documents, and when you print them using those services, that's usually at a lower price and a higher quality than you ever could print them at home. An example of that is, this is a special, well, it's run out, but Walgreens had a special 4x6 prints for 9 cents a print. Well, you can't buy ink, you can't buy paper, you couldn't do that with your own printer. So If all you need is black and white, I'd recommend just going with a black and white printer, or if you do buy a combination, you can still print mainly black and white and a few color there. Second main consideration is you're going to have to pick between what's known as the all-in-one or multi-function printer. So this is an example of an all-in-one printer here. It can do scanning, copying, printing, and sometimes faxing. Or do you just get a printer that's just a printer? Its only function is printing. You can't scan documents or that. So that's a decision you have to make. And most of the printers out there, or the majority of printers, are all-in-one or multifunction. But if you do decide that you need a multifunction, there's options to look for in the multifunction. Do you need an automatic document feeder? So the cheaper printers have a flatbed where you put your image down, close the top, and then you can scan it to make a copy or to scan it into the computer. The automatic document feeders work very nice for multi-page documents or photos. So let's say you haven't gotten around to digitizing your old photos. Well, if you're going to be digitizing hundreds or thousands of photos, you may not want to individually put them on the scanner flatbed and do things. The automatic feeders can make it nice for feeding it in, and then you don't have to sit there and step things through. And also for documents, if you were taking a 10 or 20 page document to copy or to scan in, certainly having the automatic document feeders makes it a lot easier. Another feature in the all-in-ones for the scanning is there's some scanners that'll scan both sides automatically. That's usually called a duplexer. That means that you don't have to scan one side and then flip it over and put it back in again and scan the other side. And then even within these printers that'll scan both sides, some of them are much faster because they may have two scanners, so it's one pass to scan both sides of the paper, whereas some of them, the cheaper models, have to scan one side, and then you'll hear the paper kind of get turned around and moved and then scanned again. So there's differences in the models and the features for scanning there. Scanner resolutions usually start at 1200 dots per inch, and there are obviously better scanners with higher resolutions, but 1200 dots per inch for most people is going to be adequate for scanning photos and printing and copying documents.
Be able to send it. Right? I mean, if it gets too big a file, it gets to be a bigger file than what DPI put in.
Right, and that can be an issue if you scan it at too high a resolution. You may end up with a 10 megabit file, or if you're scanning 10 pages, you can end up with 100 megabit PDF or that to be try and send that. Whereas when you start printing it out, it doesn't make that much difference between a document that was scanned at 150 dots per inch or one that was scanned at 600 or 1200 dots per inch.
So my brother has an internet that's not as good as mine, and he just complains like crazy if I do something like that. If 3 or 4 scans and he's buried. I mean, he's got to sit there for 2 hours and let it download.
Yeah, and
it's not something that makes friends and influence people.
no, even though most of us have faster connections, it's still a hassle to deal with big files. And we talked before about when scanning, what quality do you really need there? Because frequently you aren't going to notice, or if you're just printing it out or looking at it online, you don't have to have that high dots per inch in the original scan there. Okay. An all-in-one printer has fewer features than a standalone scanner. So you still can buy a standalone scanner. So if you, bought your black and white printer or your standalone printer there and want to scan, there still are standalone scanners, and many of those do have more features than what you're going to find on these all-in-one or multifunction. Whether it's scanning or copying or things like that. So that's something to keep in mind if you do go the route of just the printer there. Okay, the third consideration, which for me is probably the biggest, but you do have to make those other two decisions about, do you need color, black and white, do you need a multifunction or just a plain. The third one here is the total cost, whether you're buying an inkjet or a Laserjet. You can see this graphic over here kind of shows the total cost of printer ownership. And you can see some of the things. How much does the printer cost? So the initial price is just one of the parts that goes into how much is that printer really costing you. You have other things like how many pages can you print out of the box. So when you buy the printer, you get a cartridge with it. Well, can that cartridge print 50 pages, 100 pages, or 3,000 or 6,000 pages? There's quite a difference in the printers. What does the toner cost and how many prints do they yield? How long do you plan to own the printer? How many color pages do you print monthly? How many pages you print in total a month? So those are some of the factors there. And we'll talk about this some more, and I'll show you some examples there. We're not going to, you don't see over here paper costs, because paper costs aren't going to vary between whether you buy an inkjet or you buy a Laserjet. You're still buying a ream of paper, and if you print 500 sheets a year or 5,000 sheets a year, that cost doesn't change between an inkjet and a Laserjet or printer A or printer B. You're still having to buy that paper there. So the costs that we're going to talk about are the cost of the printer itself, and then the ink or the ink or toner or whatever your device is using to print it out. We'll compare the total cost to find out what each model and cartridge really costs in that long run. For the next examples, when I talk about stuff, I'm mainly talking about just black and white printing. But if you're going to be doing color printing, you'd kind of get these same numbers for the number of pages that you're going to print in color, how much do the color cartridges cost, and you'd figure that out and add that in addition to the black and white that you're printing. But for speed and stuff like that, we'll just be talking about the black and white. How you calculate it for the color is the same calculations there. Okay, first thing you do is you have to figure out a cost per page. What's it cost you per page to print? And that you have to determine what cartridge does that printer take and what's the cost of the cartridge. In addition to the cost, you need to find out what the yield is. And the page yield for a cartridge is the average number of pages that cartridge is going to be able to print. And just a simple Google search or a look at anything online, if you go out to Amazon and buy ink, it'll always list the yield on there. So that's an easy number to get. Cost divided by yield is going to give you your cost per page. So these are some examples here that I have, and what I show here is an HP Ink Black 65 inkjet cartridge from HP. Costs $15. It yields 120 pages, or a cost of 12.5 cents per page. Now, HP also sells an H65XL, a bigger cartridge. Well, it's actually not a bigger cartridge. It's the same size cartridge. It's just with that basic 65 cartridge in here probably has the equivalent of just a little thimbleful of ink. So they don't fill these all with ink. This is a sponge. If you've never opened it up, this is a sponge here, and it's never completely full of ink there. Yes.
I also know that the first one that's in the printer even has less than
Frequently the cartridge that you get with it, people think, oh, I'm buying a $30 deal and I get $15 or $30 worth of ink. Well, sometimes you do, but most of the time it is a smaller quantity there. But HP does sell a 65 XL, $29. That yields 300 pages. So that cuts your cost down to 9 cents, 9.67 cents. Now, there's refill cartridges or compatible cartridges, not from HP, that you can buy. And here's an example here, $13 for a cartridge. It yields the same 300, and the cost is down to 4 cents, or 4.33 cents. Then I have a couple of examples here for a Canon Laserjet toner cartridge, 052 toner cartridge. The Canon cartridge costs $120. It yields 3,100 pages, or a little close to 4 cents a page there. Now the compatible, just like the compatible ink, there's ones that are refilled and stuff like that. $35 yields a 31. Now we're down to a little over a cent. So that's an example there. This last example is for a class of printers that are called tank printers or bottle printers. So instead of having the ink cartridge that you replace, they actually have a tank, a reservoir, or a bottle that you connect in. Well, you can buy the bottles of ink, the Canon bottle of ink, for $18. That'll print you 6,000 pages, or less than a cent. So 0.3 cents per page there. So in this example, and again, this isn't every ink cartridge and every configuration there, the cost per page for the bottle is the cheapest there. Okay, some of the other numbers that you have to have in order to figure out this total cost is you need to figure out the number of pages that you print per year. So this is kind of an estimate, and you want to estimate both the color and the black and white. So if you are going to go with a color printer, how much color are you going to be doing and how much black and white are you going to be doing? You want to figure that out. That number, maybe you can get a little bit of an idea based on the number of reams or packs of paper that you buy per year. Is it just one and that lasts you all year? Or is it a case of you're buying a new ream of paper every month? That'll give you an idea. Or how much ink you're currently going through today with your current printer. You can usually kind of come into a number there to figure out. Now I looked this up. It said the average person does 35 pages a month, or 420 in a year. And so you can kind of use that if you're not sure how much you're printing. But you also have to figure for all the members of your family. So if you're a family of 4 and the kids are printing stuff for school and you're printing stuff and your wife is printing stuff, you have to add all of that up to figure out the total number of pages that you're going to end up printing in a year. Another number that you need is the number of years the printer will last. Now, this is, again, no number that you can look online or do a Google search for, because they don't ever list how long a printer will last. Because for one person, that printer may only last 3 years before they want to get a new one. For another one, it may last 12 years. You kind of have to go by your past experience or default to something like 6 years. You're going to hold on to that printer for 6 years. The cartridge cost, or your cost for those ink cartridges or toner cartridges or that, is going to be taking the number of pages that you print in a year times the number of years your printer will last, minus the yield from the first ink cartridge that you got with the printer. So that was what was mentioned there. You do get X number of pages with your printer when you buy it, because there is a toner cartridge or an ink cartridge in there. And then you multiply that by the cost per page. So it sounds complicated, but again, these numbers can be found, and they'll give you an accurate idea of what that is going to cost you there. You then take that cartridge cost, add it to the initial cost. How much did the printer initially cost? That's going to give your total cost over the life of the printer there. So here's a grid that I created showing some of this for different numbers. So up here, I have the number of pages printed per month. So this is 35 pages a month. You think that you're only going to keep the printer for 3 years? That means over the life of the printer, you're going to be printing 1,260 pages. And you can see the difference here, 70 pages a month for 3 years, 200 pages for 3 years, 6 years, and then 12 years. So I just put in a bunch of different numbers to show how it affects some of these things here. And you can see, obviously, the largest, if we print 200 pages a month, we keep it for 12 years, we would have printed out 28,800 pages over the life of the printer. Now down here are those different ink cartridges that I showed in the cost per page. The HP Black 65 ink. And this is a printer that you can buy, and you can buy this printer on sale for $30. Multifunction printer, $30. Not much there, but again, if we do the calculations, over 3 years, printing 35 pages a month, we end up with a total cost of $173. If we use the XL cartridges, the HP XL cartridges, our costs go down a little bit to $140. If we use the refilled cartridges or compatible cartridges, our cost is $79. If we have the Canon Laserjet, which costs $205 to buy, we wouldn't have even, in the course of 3 years, that cartridge that we get with it will print 3,100 pages. So we wouldn't have even used up one cartridge over the course of 3 years there. So our total cost would have been $205. And again, if we were going to go compatible, well, we wouldn't have had to buy a compatible, so it still would have been $205. And this tank costs $300, and we wouldn't have had to buy a new tank there or bottle. So our cost would have been $300. This is the legend down here. The items that are in yellow are the lowest cost for that particular year, for that particular number of pages printed. So the yellow in this case for 3 years, 35 pages. The cheapest printer would be the inkjet here at $79, buying compatible cartridges there. The red shows the highest cost, and so we can see here the bottled ink would have been the highest at $300 over it. The green text here is we would have never used up the initial cartridge that came with the printer because we're not printing enough. We didn't print over 3,000 pages here, so we really didn't have to buy a toner cartridge, and we didn't have to buy ink there. So now let's look at some of the other numbers here, and you can see once we get to a higher volume of printing, or plan on keeping it multiple years, 6 years or 12 years, look at how dramatically some of the costs for these cartridges add up. So where we're doing the highest volume here, we'll take a look here where we're printing out 28,000 pages there. Our cost for that inkjet would have been $3,615 buying those cartridges every 120 pages. Buying a cartridge here. If we use the larger ink, well, we could have cut our cost a little bit, and the refilled would have gotten it down to $1,200 there. And this is with the toner cartridges, what we have there. And in this particular case, the cheapest would have been the ink bottles or the tank cartridge there. We would have gotten by with $368. So quite a difference between them, 10 times or over $3,200 difference there. And most people don't realize how much those cartridges are costing because you're putting that out maybe every 2 months, 3 months, or whatever. You're buying a cartridge, and it doesn't sink in how much over the life of that printer you might have spent on all those cartridges over the life there. So it pays to kind of figure out what printer you want and then run your own numbers, because the number of things that you print, that's up to you. How long you think you might keep it, that's up to you. But you can see that in most cases, HP is selling this printer for $30, which is cheaper, which is less money than what they can make it for. They can't make it for $30 because it's got Wi-Fi, it's got a scanner, it costs them more than $30 to make it, but they know that you're going to be buying ink. So they're essentially giving you something because they know that you're going to be buying ink, and they'll make, well, even if you just keep it 6 years, they're going to make big money off of you over 6 years. So it's something that you want to go through and you want to do your calculations. Okay, what are some other considerations when you're buying printers? Well, speed. If you print longer documents, you'll want a laser printer. Laser printers are typically always faster than the inkjet. Inkjet printers will claim fast speeds, but they rarely live up to their claims. They may say 10 or 20 pages per minute. They don't print 10 or 20 pages a minute. It's a phony number there. Fake news. Higher-end models of inkjets and laserjets do print faster, so the more money you pay, you will see faster printers than the basic models out there. But also in inkjets and laserjets, you have this wake-up time to print each job. So if your printer has been sitting idle for a while and you want to print out a 5-page document or that, you're never going to get the true throughput there because your printer is going to have to wake up. And if it's an inkjet, it may have to go through a cleaning cycle to clean it and prepare it, or a laserjet to warm up a little bit. Since it was in standby mode or power saving mode before you start printing. Physical size. Be sure to look into your printer's size with the trays extended. Printers come in all shapes and sizes. So if you have limited space or a particular place in the house where you want it to go, you're going to want to check out the physical size that it is. Paper size, do you just print regular sheets of paper, or do you print legal? Do you need envelopes? Do you need labels? Do you have heavy cardstock? Photo, are you printing 4x6 photos? Depending on those, you want to make sure that your printer can accommodate it. Not all printers can. So some of the printers will just accommodate regular 8x10 paper there. Paper feed. If you're going to share the printer within the house and over the network, you may need multiple trays. So let's say some of your documents are legal and some of them are standard. It's handy to have multiple trays. That way you don't have to kind of swap in and out and change settings on the printer each time you have a different type there. There's also large capacity trays. So some trays will take 150 pages, others will take 400, or a ream of paper, 500 sheets there. Some of the printers will also do auto print duplex. So if you're printing on both sides of the piece of paper, or want to print on both sides, a lot of the printers will let you do it manually, which means that you print one side and then you have to take the pages, feed it back up, and then it'll print on the other side there. Well, if you do want to do that quite a bit, it's handy to buy a printer that'll do that duplexing for you. And if you are using special paper or things like that, some of the printers will not circle the paper 180 degrees. They'll only circle the paper 90 degrees, so that makes it easier to do some of the thicker papers. Some other considerations, connections. All of them will usually connect to your desktop or laptop through a USB cable. But if you want Wi-Fi, not everyone has Wi-Fi. Or if they have Wi-Fi, they may not have an Ethernet connection. It's just a Wi-Fi connection. and then some of them support what's called near-field communications, and those types of options are nice if you're going to be printing from your smartphone or a tablet, or if you want to share it with other people in the house there. Not all the printers have memory card readers, slots where you can put in an SD card or stuff like that. So if you do want to print photos directly off your cards, that requires a printer that supports your memory card. But also you'll want something with a little better LCD screen, because you're going to have to usually navigate or select and do some things there, so you'll want a bigger screen. Resolution, this is the resolution. We were talking before about scanning resolution. Now this is the resolution when it prints on the piece of paper. The number of dots a printer prints out in a square inch, over 1440 dots per inch is good. So you want at least that. If you want higher quality or higher resolution, or you're going to be printing photos and things like that, you'll want to look at their resolution and the quality there. Another one is PostScript fonts. These are fonts that are built into the printer. Most inkjet printers don't have PostScript compatibility there. They can print fonts, but they print it all as graphics, which means that a large number of ones and zeros have to pass over there for it to know how to print that out. Whereas a true PostScript printer, instead of sending, let's say, 10,000 ones and zeros to print a word, it can all it sends is the 4 characters to print the word, and the printer knows how to format those characters into the PostScript font. So it's a trade-off. The printer's going to be faster, it's going to be higher quality. Power saving, most of them will conserve power because you tend to leave them on all the time, but there are ones that are better at power conservation or that wake up faster when you do want to print things. So you can look at that. Okay, those are the main considerations when looking at printers. Now we'll talk a little bit about what inkjets are better for and what laserjets are better for. Inkjets are better than laserjets if you need high quality color photo output. So if you are going to print color and color photos specifically, inkjets are going to be better than laserjets for that. Inkjets are less costly than laserjets if you rarely print. So in that example where I talked about printing 35 pages a month or less, if you don't print that much, a laserjet can be cheaper to operate than the laserjet there. High-end inkjets will produce better quality photos than a basic inkjet. So as you pay more money for an inkjet, a $30 inkjet, compared to a $80 or $100 inkjet or a $150 inkjet, you're going to see higher, better graphics to print there in the inkjets, and higher speeds. Thing to remember is inkjet cartridges do have expiration dates. So usually the ink is good for 2 years or so at the most. If you don't print a lot, your cartridges can become old, and when they become old, some of the ink that's formulated for these cartridges starts gelling, and then it doesn't come out right, or it jams, or you get smearing. Laser toner basically lasts forever, so that's a little difference between the two.
Do they freeze? Will ink cartridge freeze? You know?
I don't know at what.
HP ships me my ink cartridges, and they sit out in my mailbox at 20 below. Does that damage them or not?
I'm not aware of that. It might be worth Googling that to see. I mean, you know, unfortunately, I don't know any solution to that other than buy it all in the summer, or you know, stay away from, or move down south and buy your ink down in Florida. Or,
Factor that into the cost of buying it.
right. I have to go down to the Caribbean to get some ink for my printer. This is an interesting, I think I got this out of Consumer Reports where they were talking about ink there. Ink, because of that high cost for the cartridge and just so little that's actually in here. Ink is one of the most expensive things on the planet, and they quoted the figure of $6,400 a gallon for ink, what you're paying for. So it's one of the most expensive liquids you can buy. You wouldn't know it, but that's where the stuff can add up there.
There's a lot of chemistry in ink, okay?
Yeah, and
If you got
3M.
into that, you'd know that people spend their life working on inks.
Right, and 3M partnered with HP, so if you're not familiar, that's why we have a lot of HP equipment, because HP says you need to buy our stuff because we're a strategic business partner with you. A lot of ink never ends up on the page, so this stuff is very, very expensive, $6,400 a gallon. Well, if you don't print that often, every time your printer starts up, it goes through a cleaning cycle and stuff like that. Well, you're probably wasting more ink in the cleaning cycle than you're using printing there. So that's why you may not get 120 pages out of that cartridge that you were supposed to get. Maybe you only get 50 pages or that, and your cartridge runs out there. And that's because, whenever you start a print job and you hear it go, beep, beep, it's actually pushing ink out of the cartridge and over a little squeegee. It's cleaning the print head on here. And in order to do that, this very, very expensive ink is getting shot out and wasted. None of it is being used to print there. For better photos, get a color inkjet with multiple color cartridges. So some of the cheaper printers you'll see will have a black cartridge and then they'll have a color cartridge. Well, those aren't going to give you that good a color photos or stuff like that. Yes, you will have some color, but you're better off having a separate color for this CMYK is for cyan, magenta, yellow, and then this is black. K is black there. You're better off having individual cartridges for each of those, and then maybe you're printing a lot of photos and they have red in there. When the red runs out, you're just buying a cartridge for red. You aren't throwing the complete cartridge out, the color, and buying a new color cartridge. So if you do want better photos, make sure you have a printer that has a separate ink. Super tank inkjets, we talked a little about those, have the refillable reservoirs to replenish. You're going to pay more for those up front, so they don't give those printers away because they know that they're not going to make money on selling the ink, or you may in the whole life, you may never have to buy another bottle of ink for it if it prints 6,000 pages and you don't print that much. They're the lowest cost per page of anything. So they're lower than Laserjets. They're lower than obviously the other inkjets there. Okay, now we'll talk about Laserjets. Laserjets provide fast print speeds. So they're very fast printing there. Low cost per page and a clean look of the finished product. Lasers have a higher upfront cost, but a lower cost per page. So you are going to pay more for them up front, but as we saw, if you use it for 3 years or 6 years or 12 years, you're not having to buy as many cartridges as the ink there. Laserjets aren't intended for glossy photo stock. So I've seen this before with people where they'll put in glossy paper and they go, why doesn't this look like a photograph in here? Well, laser printers, the way they print is different than inkjet printers. Inkjet printers shoot ink, and the glossy paper is made for the inkjet printers. It's not made for the laser printers. So you're never going to get that type of printing there with a laser printer there. Another advantage of laser printers, obviously they can print one page after another right on top of each other. There's no bleed through. Whereas if you're printing images or stuff like that with an inkjet, sometimes you might have the pages stick together because there's wet ink and it transfers to some of the adjacent pages. In addition to the cartridge cost per page, Laserjets can have other costs that might apply, and this basically only applies if you do a whole lot of printing. So if you're like 3M and you've got 100 people using the printer or stuff like that, you're going to be printing a large number there. Well, then things like the drums, the fusers, the rollers, and the pickup rollers may need to be replaced every year or every 2 years or something like that. Depends on, again, how much you print. But most users don't run into that, but if you are going to be printing a lot, it's something to consider. Buying for color cartridges, toner for a Laserjet is very expensive and often exceeds the cost of the printer there. So that's something to keep in mind. I'll mention this again, almost any inkjet color photo will be superior in quality to any color laser. Laserjets tend to look flat or not have a lot of definition there. The strength of a color laser is in printing text. So if you're printing a pie chart or a bar chart or you're highlighting text in blue or green or something like that, color Laserjet is fine for that. But if you start comparing a photograph from an inkjet to a photograph printed on a Laserjet, again, the quality is going to be better on the inkjet than it is on the Laserjet. There's another class of printers that is starting to come out. Again, you don't really see them too much in the stores, but they'll probably start showing up as LED printers. And those are light-emitting diodes, so instead of lasers, they're using LEDs. And they have many of the same characteristics, but they aren't that prevalent out there yet. Next, we'll have Chuck talk about why he chose a Laserjet. So, Chuck.
So I'm going to share some of my experiences and why in the world did I ever buy a Laserjet printer. This is a actual image of the printer that I have on my desk right next to my iMac. And it's a boat anchor, suitably used to take up a lot of space on top of my desk. And we'll get to some of the reasons why I have it located there instead of in the closet like I'd like to do after Tom presented how he was doing things in the closet. I couldn't do that. I purchased that for $275 off Amazon by way of PC Rush Outlet was the name of the company. Bought that through Amazon. Oh, one tip, whenever you buy things, first thing I do when I go to buy something, I look on Amazon, I look at the ratings, and the first thing I look at is the 1-star ratings. I look at those first because I want to see what the problems are that people experience, because I don't want those problems. Okay, that's the first thing I look at. And if some printer, even though it might be 3.5 or 4 stars overall, if they got some significant problems, particularly over time, like 3 years into use of a product, I stay away from those. So anyways, I had a history of problems using a laser or an inkjet printer. I had an HP before this one that I list up here, the Lexmark business class wireless multifunction inkjet printer. What happened is I ended up with a huge mess of ink inside of it. I kept saying, what's happening? I'm going through all these ink cartridges, and I keep going through them, and it kept going faster and faster. So one day I opened up the printer, looked inside, and here's all this ink all spread out inside the printer. I said, okay, we're getting rid of that one. I have an aversion to babysitting devices. I like to set them up, and I just want them to work. I'm not a real techie, Tom knows a lot of stuff, and everybody always asks Tom about, how do I do this, how to do that, and Tom has all the answers. I don't want to be that person. I want a dependable printer. Turn it on, press the button on the computer, and it works for me, and I don't have to worry about it. One of the things I do in my spare time, now I'm retired, is I lead the adult Sunday school program at our church. It's a medium plus size church. Our attendance is, like 600 and some people on a Sunday morning. So it's a good sized program we've got in our adult Sunday school. We have, like last Sunday, we had 163 people that attended. We have a planning group, and I lead that group when we plan what we're going to do with that program going forward. And I have to have 9 copies of a 10-plus page agenda every month. And sometimes those agendas run over 20 pages. So just on that, I print a fair amount of print, and then do the meeting minutes, and I have to print at least 1 copy of that because one person doesn't really do email very well, doesn't have his own computer. I print out weekly attendance and offering metrics and keep track of those, and occasionally I have signs and announcements and those sort of things that I have to print out. I also am the leader for the Oakdale Pickleball Club. I know I don't look like it, but I actually play pickleball. And I have to track daily attendance for that. That goes on in the spring through fall time period. I also lead canoe trips up to the Boundary Waters. Last year I had 3 of those trips. I always do at least 2. So I have a spreadsheet with equipment in it and what routes we're going to take and who the people are and what the expenses are. A list of all the food. And a menu, and those planning documents run as much as 20 pages. And I always think I've got the final answer, and then we do the planning meeting, and they'll go, oh, we've got to change everything around, so I print it multiple times. I have a Christmas letter that I do, and most of those actually, like Tom was suggesting, we use the Office Max, we send it over there, we look for the coupon. Usually there's a coupon that comes out in like November. We grab that Office Max coupon and then go to Office Max and we print it and take a thumb drive in and print it there. But we always end up having to print, a dozen or more copies that we didn't give them enough at Office Max. My wife loves to do watercolors. And what she does is she paints these watercolors and then she produces images. Usually it's, an image like this, and then she'll take and she'll reduce it. And she creates cards. So it's like a sympathy card or a Christmas card or something like that. And she sells those once a year. So what she wants to do is she often wants to print those, not the final copy, but she'll print like a proof text to see what it looks like. And so she likes to use my printer for that. Although lately that hasn't been working. I'll get to that in a minute. The problems with the Laserjet that I have. There's a difficult interface it's got a little screen. It's like this. It's like maybe a postage stamp size. At least it feels like that. And not only that, it's really tough to read. If you don't have the bright lights on it, it's almost impossible to see what's going on. I have tried both compatible and reconditioned cartridges. Neither one work. Either they just flat out don't work at all, or they end up, running maybe half as long as the original ones. So I gave up on those and I buy the original ones from HP. Wireless interface problems. I'd say about every 5 or 6 months, for whatever reason, the wireless connection would fail. I thought it was me. Okay, then I started doing some Googling, and Google is your best friend. So I started Googling wireless problems for printers, and I found a lot of people have the same kind of issue. And I sit down, there's a HP utility that you can use to make the connection. It's very helpful. Usually I get it figured out. I think the last time I made it work, it took me about a day to get it so it worked correctly, so I can connect both my printer and my wife's printer in. Recently, my wife's computer died on her, and in order to try to set it up again, I had to go through that process again. I couldn't get it to work. So now I just said, forget it. I'm using the USB cable. So that's why it sits on my desk, and I can't put it in the closet.
It's faster there.
It is faster. Yeah, there is a certain amount of time it takes, particularly if you got a large document. One thing Tom didn't mention, if you got a really big document, it takes quite a while for it to get from your computer down into the printer, for the printer to buffer it up and then actually print it. The cartridges, Tom mentioned that they're expensive. $139 for 2 black and white ones. And the pack of the cyan, yellow, and magenta, that's just 3 cartridges for $203. That's approaching the cost of the printer. So just like Tom mentioned earlier on, you can spend easily as much as the printer just on the cartridges. I have had some good experiences with this printer. Their print quality is good, although not picture quality. You do need to run the clean function periodically, and I usually forget to do that until I start looking at it, and all of a sudden, maybe the yellow or the blue or something doesn't quite right, and so I run that, and then it comes back again. It has been very dependable, except for the wireless issues. The jams are infrequently, and they're really not hard to clear. And the cartridges last a long time, over 1,000 pages before I need to replace a cartridge. There is an HP utility, and it does seem to be pretty accurate and that's actually images I took screenshots. It's pretty good. It seems to be accurate about what's going on with the cartridges, and it does give an estimate. Probably that print's too small, but it gives you an estimate of how many pages you have left. Any questions on my experience with the Laserjet? Welcome.
Do you know when it's doing those estimates, is it keeping track of how you?
No.
I mean, if you happen to have something that's heavy on magenta.
They aren't that sophisticated, because that's the same as the page yield, where I talked about the cost per deal. Well, page yield, that's where frequently you'll get people say, well, I'm supposed to get 120 pages or 120 pages out of this ink cartridge. I only get 80 pages out of the ink cartridge. Well, again, if most of it is wasted on the cleaning, or it's a case of what you're printing has a larger surface area to print than what the estimate that they're doing. All of these estimates are working off of percentages. So like the black and white is working out a percentage of less than 50% of the page is actually printed in ink or toner cartridge, which on a normal document is fine. But if you're printing black and white photos, guess what? Your output is going to be less than a half, maybe a third of what it should be.
And the other thing is, when that top image up there, where it talks about how much you have left in the cartridge, you can actually run it after it gets down close to 0. But then I found what happens when you do that, then it starts getting real sketchy. Like it starts if it's black and white, it starts turning blue.
Yep.
I have a question, and it's I have a printer, a Canon, and it's a really cheap one, and I've had it for a few years. But the scanning feature, which I have always used and really loved, last summer, for whatever reason, it decided that when I would scan multiple pages, it would just make them individual documents. And I've gone online, tried to figure that out, and I can't get it to scan like 3 pages in one document. Do you have any idea what?
Each package for scanning and what it offers certainly varies from printer to printer, and some of the right. They come up with new drivers for the printer, and then some of the stuff doesn't work, and unfortunately, I mean, you can try a Google search to see if that has it, but when you manually do things, well, then you can usually get at more of the settings, to save as a PDF or to say, things like that.
Yeah, you can just save it as a PDF, save each one as a PDF, and let's use something like PDF Expert.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that I can do it. That's time.
I similar experience, and when I scan through JPEG, there are always a single document, 1 page per document. But when I scan them as PDF, then you can do multiple pages per document. So maybe it defaulted to JPEG.
Yeah, try a Google there.
How often do you clean your Laserjet? I mean, you put the, inside.
To be honest,
Yeah.
probably about once every 8 months, but I probably should do it about every 3 months.
Because it seems to me that sometimes the paper you use can make a difference. The Laserjet paper is more expensive, but you don't get as much
Okay, we'll quickly cover, I know we're a little over time there, but just a few more slides here. Once you finalize your list of requirements and are looking to buy, look at some of the comparison sites, look at the reviews like Chuck mentioned to get an idea of what the comments are or what didn't work or where the problem is, the ease of use or things like that. You'll usually see those. And like Chuck mentioned, look at the 1 stars. Don't look at the 4 stars or the 5 stars. They're just going to say everything worked great for me. It's those 1 stars or the people saying it didn't do this. Now, in some cases, what I'll see out there is people didn't actually read the instructions or didn't follow. So not all 1 stars mean it's a bad product. You have to do a little interpretation there. Once you've identified potential candidates, go to some of the stores, look at the output, look at the printer, see how fast it prints, because they can show you the printing and stuff like that in person. When you're going to buy, that's where you can go online and you can get it from Amazon or search for prices. For inkjet or Laserjet cartridges, I recommend that you buy them through an eBay or an Amazon. You're typically going to find them cheaper there. You do have to plan ahead, so make sure that you don't, your son or your wife has something to print out right away and you don't have a backup cartridge or that to be able to print out. Check the reviews if you plan to use. Like Chuck mentioned, you'll find a wide spectrum of whether the refilled cartridge or recycled cartridges or compatible cartridges work. Maybe the quality was a little bit less. Maybe there was a hassle. Some cartridges, you're going to get a pop-up box that says this is an illegal cartridge or a refilled cartridge. And so it's not always a case of saying use the cheapest toner or the cheapest cartridge out there. And if you're not printing that much, well, then your cost isn't going to be that much different. The more you print, maybe you look at some of the cheaper printers there. And this is an example from Sunday paper, Office Depot, and you can see they list some of their features, the speed that they're doing, the number of sheets, but you can see there's all different printers, and there's, like I mentioned earlier, there's hundreds of different printers, and there isn't one perfect printer that's right for everybody, because everybody has different needs. You're printing out differently, you plan on keeping it a lot longer, you need the auto feed, so you can see some of these have the auto feed, and some of them are just a straight black and white printer here, or if you need the multifunction, if you need the color, then that helps you determine what kind of printer that you really need there. Okay, any questions? Yeah.
I got, can you make any comments about recycling spent cartridges? I mean, are companies actually encouraging people to recycle your spent cartridges or just throw them away?
Well, there are many recycling programs. So like an Office Max, a Staples, a lot of places will have drop-offs of your old cartridges and that. And what happens to there, if you're not familiar, is they actually do, a lot of them do get recycled. So they put new ink and then they get sold as recycled cartridges there. So rather than going in the dump, yes, I would recommend at a minimum, just stick them in a bag, take them to the store once a year, twice a year, whatever. You don't have to take them all the time there, and that's true of laser toner cartridges and inkjet, because they're both being recycled, and 3M as a company does that, and it's just like any other recycling at home. It keeps it out of the landfills. Yeah.
You mentioned about buying a printer. You get them from Amazon or but a lot of the local companies like Target and Best Buy will match any price that you have on Amazon. So sometimes it's more convenient if you need to take something back rather than mailing it out or repackaging it. You get it from the local company.
No, that's a good tip there if you do want it. The other thing that I look at is sometimes it's easier for me to buy it even like from a Walmart. I'll go out to the Walmart site. The site sells more than just the stuff they have in the stores. But in that particular case, it's like 2-day free shipping. Well, saves me making a run, a little bit of gas, a little bit of time, things like that. And as long as somebody doesn't steal the package, you're going to get your item there. Yeah. Yeah.
Some printers have the print heads in the cartridge, and others have them in the printer. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well,
I mean, if they're in the printer, if they gum up, you're done.
yeah, there's a couple of things. Yeah, I mean, like this is your print head down here, and whether it's in the printer or in the cartridge, what's happening when you start up the printer or do stuff, it's sending a signal to this to push out some ink here and swipe it off with a little squeegee. And that's where, if it gets too much, like Chuck was running into, you're going to have a lot of ink in there and a lot of dirty there. Now, whether for a cartridge, it's okay there, but if you're going to be printing a lot of stuff, you can see that cost gets very expensive. If you're not printing that much, then this is a better solution, because you can see that total cost. For 3 years, low amount of printing, $79. Well, that's cheaper than a Laserjet, or it's cheaper than any other there. Right. Now, when you talk about a printer that has a tank or the bottles, obviously they don't have a cartridge like this. They have a print head. That print head, there is mechanisms to clean the print head and similar to the laser cartridges cleaning and that. It's a process that it goes through to try and remove some of the residue that may be on the print head and things like that.
So lines that are jammed, like you were talking about gel ink and things like that. I mean, it must be little lines that go to the print heads.
There's tubes that go to the print head. Now, can they gel up? If Linda was here, Linda has been using tanks or bottles for 15 years or more, because you used to be able to buy conversion kits to take old printers and turn them into bottle printers and that. And she did a lot of photo, and she'd take of weddings and different things where she did a lot of printing, and obviously her costs were a lot less if she used that. And there's ways to clean it. Now, do you have to manually take out each tube and maybe clean it? That can happen, so maintenance. Other questions? If not, we'll see you next month then. We'll declutter. Thank you. And if you do have your membership fee, you can drop it off with myself or Jim there.
He had all the problems last meeting. Doc, what is pickleball? Pickleball? Yeah.
Pickleball is like people use a paddle. And then about like this. Okay. And you play outside of the court, maybe half the court size of the tennis court. And you use a ball. You play 4 people inside. Four plays. Well, let's see what. And we got special rules about this.
What did you do pickleball? I have never heard of it.
Well, take a look at it. Don't be discouraged when you see some of the YouTube videos, because they'll have professional guys on there.
Oh.
Okay.
Will you be on it then?
No, I'm not be on it. Okay, I'm like an average level player. I do it because it's fun, and because they said if we don't get somebody to lead them, we're going to kill the fun. So I finally said, okay.
All right.
Yeah, there's,
Let's see.
I can't remember their names. Somebody who person used to come and play with us. Have you played that? Have you played that?
Yeah, okay.
Every phone number they
They moved to the Bahamas or,
The thing that gets me is the years that I played.